Back in 2021, I took a job as a wildlife field technician in the Pacific Northwest. The position involved tracking and documenting animal activity deep in national forests. It wasn't glamorous, and the pay was nothing to brag about, but I just finished school and wanted something remote and peaceful. Emphasis on peaceful. That peace, though, was broken my third week on the job. My assigned area was in a particularly dense stretch of forest that was known for bear sightings, so I had to carry bear spray and make regular check-ins with my supervisor. Most of the time, I'd hike a couple of miles, set up a few motion sensor cameras, take notes, and hike back out before sunset. The thing was, due to a scheduling error, I ended up having to stay overnight in the field, alone. We had small, pre-built observation cabins scattered throughout the forest for exactly that purpose. They were pretty bare bones. A cot, a radio, a single light powered by a car battery, and a lock on the door that looked older than the trees around it. I wasn't too worried. I'd done overnights before, but that night would be different. The sun set around 7:30. I cooked a quick meal from a camping ration, wrote down some notes, and sat in silence, just enjoying the sounds of the woods until they stopped. It was around 9 p.m. when I realized how still it had become. No bugs, no wind, no distant hoots or rustles, just nothing. It felt like the whole forest was holding its breath. I leaned over to turn off the little lantern and give my eyes a second to adjust. Sometimes silence like that is just nature resetting itself. And then something knocked on the cabin wall. Not loud, just a soft, deliberate knock, like someone gently rapping their knuckles right by my head. I froze. The cabin didn't have windows, but the walls were thin. I grabbed the flashlight and scanned the inside. Nothing. I waited a minute, then two. Nothing more. I told myself it could have been a tree branch or an animal brushing past. But then it came again. 3 knocks. Slightly louder. Same spot. I wanted to speak, maybe yell, but my throat felt like it had closed up. I slowly reached for the old radio on the table, but it let out nothing but static. I flicked it off immediately, afraid the sound might alert whatever was outside. I sat in complete silence for what felt like hours, but it had only been 10 minutes. Then came the sound of shuffling around the back of the cabin. Footsteps. Not an animal. Not the 4-legged kind, at least. I know what a bear sounds like. This was different. This was deliberate. Padded steps, pauses, a crunch of leaves, and then silence again. I was gripping the flashlight so tightly my knuckles hurt. I didn't dare move. Suddenly the door rattled violently. The whole cabin shook. Whatever it was trying to get in. And the lock, an old rusted latch, did not seem like it was going to hold. I backed up toward the cot and held up the flashlight like it was a weapon. The rattling stopped as abruptly as it had started. Then something whispered my name. I swear to God, it whispered my name. Just once. From right outside the door. I hadn't told anyone where I was staying. Only my supervisor knew my assignment for that day. No one else. The name was whispered so clearly, like it was coming from someone crouched just behind the door, like they were inches away from me. I did what I should have done an hour ago. I locked myself in the tiny closet next to the cot. I pulled the door shut, turned off the flashlight, and tried not to breathe too loudly. More footsteps circled the cabin, once, twice, then nothing. Eventually, I must have dozed off. The next thing I remember was waking up to sunlight filtering through a crack in the door. I was drenched in sweat, and my muscles were sore from sleeping upright. But the moment I stepped out of the closet, I noticed the door to the cabin was open, just slightly. The latch had been snapped clean off. No scratches, no forced entry, just broken, as if someone had unlocked it from the outside with a key. Or with purpose. There were no footprints around the cabin, no signs of wildlife, no broken branches or disturbed ground, just a quiet forest and a broken door. I packed up and hiked back out that morning without saying a word to anyone. When I returned to base, I filed a report saying I'd had equipment issues and requested a different assignment zone. Later that week, my supervisor mentioned in passing that the observation cabin I'd stayed in hadn't been used in years, that I must have been mistaken because it was supposedly scheduled for demolition due to safety issues. I asked him how that could be when I had keys to it, and he looked confused. "We don't issue keys to that one anymore," he said. "It's been locked for over a year." But I had a key. It was given to me in a packet with my assignment. I never found out who put that cabin on my list. And when I went back to the storage room to check, the key was gone from my envelope. There was no record of me being assigned to that sector at all. I've since left that job. I still love the forest, still enjoy hiking, but I don't stay overnight anymore, especially not in cabins, because if something can whisper your name in the middle of nowhere without ever being seen, it probably already knows where you're going next. I used to work late-night shifts at a local gas station off a rural highway in Montana. The place was pretty quiet most of the time. A few truckers, some regulars, maybe the occasional drunk guy coming in to grab snacks or smokes. Nothing too wild. The station had security cameras, thick glass at the register, and a lockable back room where we kept most of our supplies. It was just me working the overnight shifts, from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. I didn't mind. I liked the solitude. I brought books, my headphones, and I always had a thermos full of coffee to keep me going. But one night last year changed everything, and I think about it almost every time I drive past that stretch of highway. It started like any other shift. I clocked in, cleaned up around the store, stocked the coolers, and waited for customers. By midnight, it had already gotten unusually quiet. No passing cars, no engine hum. Walking. Eventually, he made his way to the back of the store where the coolers were, and he stood there, just staring at the glass for a good minute. I could see him on the security monitor. Something about him made the hairs on my arms stand up. Then he did something that really freaked me out. He looked up at the camera, dead on, and smiled, like he knew I was watching. I reached under the counter and placed my hand on the panic button, just in case. I didn't press it, not yet, but I was ready. He came back up to the counter, finally, holding a single bottle of water. He placed it down without saying a word, and I rang him up. He paid in exact change, still silent, still smiling. As he took the bottle, he looked up at me and finally spoke. His voice was raspy, like he hadn't used it in days. "You should lock the doors after I leave," he said. I asked him why, trying to keep my voice steady. He didn't answer, just walked out the door and disappeared into the night. I waited until his car left the lot, then immediately locked the front entrance. Something wasn't right. I couldn't explain it. Maybe I was just being paranoid, but I wasn't taking any chances. About an hour passed with nothing. Then, just after 2 a.m., the power cut out. The store went completely dark, except for the emergency lights. The cooler stopped humming. The radio turned off. I stood behind the counter, barely breathing. I figured it might be a blown fuse or something, so I grabbed the flashlight and went into the back room to check. As I walked through the door, I heard a sound from the front of the store. It was the doorbell, the little chime that rings when someone walks in. But I had locked the door. I turned around slowly, shining the flashlight through the darkness. There were 3 people standing just inside the doorway. I don't know how they got in. The door hadn't made a noise, no glass was broken, and the lock was still turned. They just appeared. 2 men, 1 woman, all wearing dark hooded jackets, faces pale, eyes wide, all of them smiling. I backed slowly into the supply room and locked the door behind me. I tried using the landline to call the police, but the line was dead. My cell had no signal out here as always. I could hear them moving around out there, not talking, just walking, pacing the store, opening coolers, shuffling things around. Then one of them knocked on the supply room door. Not pounding, just a polite knock. "Let us in," a woman's voice said. It was quiet, almost cheerful. "We just want to talk," another voice added, muffled by the door. I didn't respond. I didn't move. I just stood there with the flashlight off, holding my breath and praying they'd leave. They stayed for what felt like hours, occasionally knocking, sometimes laughing. Then, just as suddenly as they appeared, they were gone. I waited a full 30 minutes before coming out. The power was back on, the lights were on. Everything looked untouched, except for one thing. A single water bottle. The same brand the man had bought earlier. It was sitting on the counter. I reviewed the footage from the security cameras. Nothing. Just static during the entire time they were in the store. The camera feed cut out exactly when the power did, and didn't come back on until right after they left. I called the cops later that morning, filed a report. They looked into it, but they didn't find any evidence anyone had broken in. The doors were still locked. No fingerprints. Nothing. I don't know who those people were. I don't know how they got in or why they were there. But I quit that job the following week. Sometimes when I'm driving late at night, I'll pass that old gas station. It's closed down now, abandoned. But every now and then I swear I see a faint light inside, or a figure in the window. And whenever I stop for gas at night now, I never buy water. My wife and I recently bought a house just outside a small town in Oregon. It's a quiet area surrounded by woods, which we liked. After years of apartment living and hearing neighbors stomp around above us or slam doors next to us, we wanted privacy and peace. What we didn't expect was how unsettling that kind of silence could become. The house is a cozy 2-bedroom, nothing too fancy. It's a little older, built in the 70s, but it's sturdy and has charm, the kind of place you imagine growing old in. Our backyard is lined with tall pines, and at night, it gets pitch black. Not the kind of darkness you find in cities. This is total, disorienting dark. No streetlights, no neighbors' porch lights, just the woods stretching on for miles behind our fence. It started about 2 weeks after we moved in. It was a Sunday night. I remember because my wife had just gone to bed early to get up for work the next morning. I stayed up to finish a movie in the living room. Around midnight, I paused the movie to get a drink from the kitchen. As I was standing at the sink, I noticed a small, pulsing light coming from the backyard. It was faint, like a flicker, low to the ground. At first, I thought maybe one of the solar-powered garden lights had come on, but we hadn't set any up yet. So I turned off the kitchen light to get a better look through the window. The light was moving. Not fast, just slowly weaving back and forth near the tree line. I stood there for a while, confused, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. My mind immediately went to some kind of animal with a glowing collar or maybe a flashlight from a distant hiker. But who hikes through woods in the middle of the night? I was about to go outside and check it out when the light just vanished. No fading, no dimming. It just blinked out. That should have been it. One weird moment. But over the next week, it kept happening. Always between midnight and 2 a.m. Always in the backyard. Sometimes just a flicker. Other times, the light would move in deliberate, almost rhythmic patterns, like it was scanning. I tried to film it, but by the time I grabbed my phone, the light would disappear. One night, I finally got brave enough to go outside. It was just after 1 a.m., and the flickering light had been hovering near the back fence for about 5 minutes. I grabbed a flashlight and quietly stepped out onto the deck. The cold hit me immediately. It was unusually cold that night. I don't know why, but I felt like I had to keep my own flashlight off at first. I didn't want to spook whatever it was, if that makes sense. I inched closer to the yard, trying to stay quiet, when I noticed something that stopped me dead in my tracks. The flickering light wasn't coming from a flashlight or any device. It was coming from someone or something kneeling on the ground. I couldn't make out details, just the shape. The light seemed to be coming from its chest, flickering softly like a slow heartbeat. I stood frozen. Then it looked up. I didn't see eyes, I didn't see a face, just the faint outline of a head lifting and turning toward me. The flicker pulsed faster. Then it stood up. I immediately turned and bolted back inside, locking the door behind me. I watched through the window, holding my breath. Nothing moved, no sound, no figure, no flicker. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I checked the backyard in the daylight. No footprints, no broken branches, nothing to prove what I saw. I told my wife about it, but I could tell she thought I was half asleep or just imagining things. Still, I knew what I saw. And then it escalated. The next night, the light didn't stay in the woods. It moved closer, to the edge of our lawn. Then closer still, night after night. Until one night, I woke up to the softest glow leaking through the cracks of our bedroom blinds. I got out of bed and pulled them open just slightly. The light was right outside our window. I couldn't see the figure clearly, but I could see the light, flickering against the siding of the house, casting shadows that didn't seem to match any real shape. I wanted to wake my wife, but I was too afraid to move. I felt like if I made a sound, it would know. It would come closer. The light pulsed once, then twice, and then disappeared. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. I started staying up with a camera by the window, hoping to catch whatever this thing was. But after that night, it stopped coming. The woods were still. No flicker, no movement. It was like it knew I was watching. Then last night happened. We had friends over dinner. They left around 10, and we were both in bed by midnight. I was finally starting to convince myself that maybe I had imagined it all. Stress, lack of sleep, maybe even some sort of lucid dreaming. That's when I heard it. A tap. One single tap on the bedroom window. My wife stirred but didn't wake. I slowly sat up in bed, the hairs on my arms already standing. Another tap. I didn't want to look, but I couldn't stop myself. I turned my head toward the blinds, and they were slightly open, just enough to see it. A face. Not human. Too long. Too narrow.